can take me down about 15% in the monitor. Hey, yep. All right.
And you can take her out of my monitor completely? Yep.
Check. Yep. Yeah,
Perfect.
all right.
Perfect. Yeah. And turn me up some in my monitor. Yeah. Up. Yep, good, thanks.
Who's gonna care for the ones who care for the ones who went to war?
Sounds good. Thank y'all. You happy back there? No, we're good, thanks. I just want to make sure you're happy and we're happy and there's joy all around.
I'm going to get this party started because we want as much Mary as we can get. I first want to thank the crew who's working with us today. We have Xander on lights. Wendy is doing the sound. Caroline is the video director. And Siobhan and Victor are our camera people. Thank you so much. And the Cafe 939 always does a great job of our songwriting department events, and we are very grateful. Hey, if I can just ask you, I know you guys like to congregate toward the back, but I bet that for the Q&A part anyway, it would be nice to have people a little bit closer to the front. So maybe if you're way back there, come up here. And don't worry, I know that some of you are going to have to leave at 2 o'clock, and I think we're all prepared for that. But in the meantime, it would be nice to see your faces up a little bit closer. Okay, so this is our first visiting artist of the semester. I just wanted to let you know that next Monday is our first originals open mic that we do every month on the last Monday of the month, and you can just come down and sign up for the open mic a half hour before it starts and play a song, meet other songwriters in the community. It's a great way to get into the community. And also we'll be having the artist Tune Yards will be here in the middle of October. If you don't know who they are, you should check them out on Spotify. Great songs and a really interesting artist. And Benjamin Groff, who's the head of everything at Brill Building Publishing, and Amanda Sammy, who is the head of creative at Cobalt, will be here during October 22nd and 23rd. And if you'd like to participate in those events, you can get a hold, write to songwriting@berkeley.edu, and we'll tell you what's going on or send you a copy of the bulletin. You can get your song screened, you can get mentoring, and you can attend the senior seminar to learn about how publishing deals are structured. So I think that's a pretty good lineup. Today we have really one of my favorite songwriters, and actually one of my favorite people, and she's a Boston original. She had, what was it called, the Dixie Kitchen here in the neighborhood, right around Berkeley for about 10 years. She was called a unique, intrinsically valuable musical voice by the Los Angeles Times. The Associated Press named her one of the best songwriters of her generation. Her most recent release, Rifles Rosary Beads, is a collection of songs written with wounded veterans, and that record was nominated for a Grammy for Best Album and Record of the Year by the Americana Music Association. The UK Americana Association named her International Artist of the Year. Her songs have been recorded by dozens of artists, including Jimmy Buffett, how about that? Blake Shelton, Tim McGraw, Betty Levette, Mike Ferris, Kathy Mattea, Bobby Bear, Amy Helm, and Candy Staton, and have appeared extensively in film and television, most recently on HBO TV's Yellowstone. Thank you so much for coming today. Can you please give a hand for Mary Gauthier?
Thanks, Bonnie. Hi, y'all. This might be better if we sort of did it as an interactive thing. But let me tell you a little bit about me so you get some idea of who I am. I used to be a restaurateur. I went to chef school in Cambridge at the Cambridge School of Culinary Arts. And I found some investors, and we opened up a place right on the corner there next to that big building. The restaurant was there for 11 years. It was called Dixie Kitchen. I'm from New Orleans, and we cook Cajun food over there. Oh, thanks, Pat. I survived for 10 years in the restaurant business, which prepared me for the music business. I was arrested opening night of that restaurant for drunk driving. I had a serious drug and alcohol problem that had dogged me. I went to my first rehab when I was 15 years old. Turned 16 in my first rehab, lived in halfway houses, and I just had a really good background for a country songwriter. And I've been building my resume since I was 14. I was arrested opening night for drunk driving in Dorchester, and I went to jail, and I got sober. My sobriety date's July 13th, 1990. A lot of y'all weren't born yet, but I was in handcuffs in jail. And it was the wake-up call that I needed. I thought it was the worst thing that could have ever happened to me. I was humiliated. It was opening night. I was celebrating. I thought that it was the end of the world in some ways. And yet, in retrospect, I look back, and it was the beginning of my life, actually. It's where I started to become authentic, and it was the beginning of the recovery that brought me to songs and songwriting and purpose. So I got sober thanks to the Dorchester Municipal Court, and also my little stay in jail helped a lot. I wouldn't recommend it although it does look good on the resume. It's cool to have bad shit in your past because the press likes to talk about that. I found out early on you highlight that stuff because that'll get you some ink. But in the end, what it did was it made me aware that I had a serious problem and I had to get help. I still work a recovery program. I'm not fixed. I ain't there yet. There ain't no there. I live sober a day at a time, and I have to work on my recovery because there is no permanent switch that fixes this shit. What's between my ears is dangerous material. I've got a thinking problem as much as a drinking problem, and not drinking doesn't really fix my thinking. So I got to work on the thinking as much as the drinking. Turns out, songwriting is a great way of doing that. So after I got arrested, maybe a couple of years after that, one of my students, who was a Berkeley College student named Christy Zarlango, brought me to an open mic at Club Passim in Harvard Square. I've Googled her because I'm writing a book now, and she's still in music. She teaches children, and she works with kids and kids' songs. She's still Boston-based and still in music. This was, 30 years ago, but happy to say she's still in music, and I remember her first and last name, and I will always remember the night she brought me to the open mic. I was newly sober. I didn't have the ability to read yet. My brain was still scrambled eggs. I couldn't read a full paragraph without being out of focus and unable to complete the comprehension of a paragraph. But she brought me to an open mic, and I saw her transform from a clumsy, awkward, not so great waitress, but wonderful person, to a powerhouse on stage. She went from being unsure and uncertain to getting behind the piano and singing her ass off. And I saw that transformation when she got on stage, and I watched the open mic, and I realized that night, this is really something I want to do. I'd always had a guitar since I was a kid, since I was 13. I used to play cover songs and sort of just dream of being a songwriter, but never imagining how to do that, really. I was too much of an addict to put together the right questions to get the right answers to how do you write songs. It just didn't make sense to me how to do it. I actually really truly believed you had to combine drugs in a certain way to write great songs. And so I would change the arrangement on the table of the drugs, thinking that would be how I would get to a great song. But I was telling Bonnie earlier, that's not songwriting, that's called drug addiction. So I had this right in front of me, these people making up songs, and some of them were real good, and Christy was amazing, and the light bulb just screwed in, and it's like, I want to do that. And I went home that night, and when you first get sober, a day feels like 20 years. 24 hours is the longest period of time of all time, every single day. When you first get sober, it just seems like, what the hell do people do with all this time? And I had so much time, and I needed to do something, and that's when songwriting came to me. And I realized I wanted to do it. So I restrung my guitar, I started building up calluses, and I made a goal to play an original song at that open mic. And I went back every week and sat in the back of the room and just watched. And I was working on songs at home, and just watched and watched and watched to see how people were doing it. And eventually I did make it to that stage 6 or 8 months later, and put my $5 down and get in the round and have my chance to shine. And let me tell you, it wasn't anything like my living room. It was a disaster, and thank God there were no iPhones and little cameras everywhere. I forgot the lyrics, I forgot the music, I forgot who I was or how to be human. I was dying of terror. All the spit in my mouth dried up. I couldn't speak. It was a disaster, and I sucked. And it left me in a shame spiral that made me want to die. And yet something inside of me, the next week, I went back. I told myself, well, it couldn't be worse than that. It took me a long time to not be terrified in front of an audience. But what I found going back week after week after week and being at the open mic was that I started to make friends and have a new community to hang out with. and I started running around with songwriters and poets and artists and creative people. The open mics are such a diverse collection of people. There was a guy from France who translated Jacques Brel into English. His name was Pierre. I remember him clearly. There was just a variety of ages for everywhere, people in their 80s to 16-year-olds, and we were all in this environment of supporting each other and ignoring each other simultaneously. Because at the open mics, you're really just self-absorbed, and you're going to clap for people, but it's not like you're there to see them. You're there to sing. But yet the support was real, and I made a new life for myself. And I guess about 8 years after that, I moved to Nashville. I made a record of the first 10 songs I wrote. It got nominated for a Boston Music Award as Best New Artist. Oh, that's my second record. My first record's called Dixie Kitchen, which was also the name of the restaurant. My big cross-marketing move. I did get nominated for Best New Artist. I was 37 years old, new artist. And so that to me was evidence. Like, well, maybe maybe I can do this. I mean, there's 1 billion people in Boston running around with a folk guitar, and I'm one of 4 who got nominated for this thing. Maybe I didn't win, but it was the universe going, keep going. You know, these little moments of validation and evidence that you're onto something. I think they're real important to encourage you and to encourage me to keep going in this wall of indifference you're going to hit when you bring your music out to the world. Every authentic applause, every acknowledgement from someone who has the authority to acknowledge you. Certainly the Boston Music Awards, I gave them the authority. And I was like, wow, it was just incredible to get that. And then I made another record. In 2 years, I really made it. That was 98. Made another record in 99, and by that point, I had gotten myself onto the board of directors over at Club Passim, and had gotten to know a lot of people that were in the folk world, and started hanging around over there a lot. And they introduced me to the guy, Bob Jones, who booked Newport at the time, and they got me in front of Bob Jones. And Bob booked me to play the main stage at the Newport Folk Festival with my second record. And after Newport, at the time when Newport booked you, other folk festivals would book you. Newport was the taste maker, and others would follow suit. I played 12 major festivals that summer, and I still was working at the restaurant. And at the end of that summer, I knew I had to quit. And I just pretty much gave the keys back to the investors. And they gave me a little bit money, enough money to make another record, and I moved to Nashville. And that's kind of my story. I've been doing it ever since. I moved to Nashville 2001. I managed to get a publishing deal, and the publisher got me a record deal. And I got 2 major label releases, and then I've just been pushing it forward ever since. I think for me, it's been a transformative and life-saving experience to be a songwriter. I never went into it to get rich and famous. I went in much older than my peers who were starting out, and I knew I was very, very lucky to have found a few people who believed in me to help me, given my age and the reality of the business. But I knew that the songs were filling me with something the restaurant never did, which is purpose. The restaurant was cool and I made money, but to me, money and purpose are different things. Purpose is something that's meaningful to me and to other people. And the restaurant was meaningful, but you know what I mean. Jambalaya only goes so far in the purpose department. And I needed to stay sober. I needed to not die of addiction. And I needed to not die by my own hand, which I battle still. I have to fight. There's a voice in my head that really does want me dead. And I use recovery, I use therapy, and I use this machine right here to help me stay alive. And so for me, it's attached directly to purpose and life-saving. The book that I'm writing is called Saved by a Song. This shirt I got at the Woody Guthrie Center, it says, "This machine kills fascists." Woody's guitar had that written on it, "This machine kills fascists." And sometimes I got a fascist in my head that's trying to kill me. And so I tell on it in these songs that I write, and it helps me to combat the monsters within and sometimes the monsters without. I'll play one of my earlier songs. I had this song at the open mic. At Passim, I would play this song, and it would get the sort of standard, like a room full of people trying to get ketchup out of a bottle. It didn't. Let's say it didn't set the open mic on fire by any means. But when I went to Nashville with this very song that was sort of a standard I'd play at the open mic for years, it got me into the publishing office, and it got me a record deal. And after the record deal, it got me on Bob Dylan's first radio show. He told his fans and the world about me on his first radio show, the Bob Dylan Theme Time Radio Hour. And the first one was called Drink. And lo and behold, Mr. Bob Dylan knew about me. I don't know how to this day that ever happened, and told the world in his Bob Dylan voice about me owning a restaurant and getting arrested, and the shit I just told you, Bob Dylan told his fans, and they still come to the shows 20 years later saying, "I heard you on Bob Dylan's Theme Time Radio Hour." And this was the song that he played, and it's the song that has opened so many doors for me, and the very song that received a sort of bored, minimal applause at the open mic for years. So you never know. It depends on the audience sometimes. And this is a song that went on to get recorded by Tim McGraw, Blake Shelton, and Bobby Bare, and Bill Chambers, Casey Chambers' dad. He did an amazing version of it. And anyway, it's called "I Drink." Well, he'd get home at 5:30, fix a drink and sit down in his chair. Mama, complain about us kids getting in his hair. At night he'd sit alone and smoke. I'd see his frown behind his lighter's flame. Now that same frown's in my mirror. I got my daddy's blood inside my veins. Fish swim, birds fly, daddies yell, mamas cry. Old men sit and think. Chicken TV dinner, 6 minutes on defrost and 3 on high. Beer to wash it down with, another, then some whiskey on the side. It ain't so bad alone here. It don't bother me that every night's the same. I don't need another lover hanging round trying to make me change. Fish swim, birds fly, lovers leave by and by. Old men sit and think. I drink, and I know what birds fly. Daddy shout, mamas cry. Old men sit and think. I drink. Thank you. So that was sort of me imagining myself having not gotten sober. I wrote that when I was about 4 years sober, and it was going through my mind, well, who would I be if I never got arrested and didn't get clean? And I could just see myself sitting in some room in a cheap apartment outside of Central Square, blaming the whole world for my problems, and particularly blaming my family and my father, and not taking responsibility for myself. And that's certainly where I was headed. So it was an imaginary song sung in first person about who I would have been if I wasn't blessed with the handcuffs God sent me. I didn't know that the song would have the traction that it did, but it certainly was one of the door opener songs for me, and still is, actually. And once Bob sanctified it and named it, name-checked it and played it on his radio show, where he didn't play contemporary music. I was one of only 2 contemporary artists he played on that show. It certainly gave me some credibility. And then to have other artists cut it has been a real good thing for me. Although, for me, I don't primarily write for other artists. I write for myself. I'm a troubadour. I go town to town to town to town and play one-night stands with just me and my guitar. I've been traveling with my partner these days, who's also a singer-songwriter. I might bring her up for something in a minute. But mostly I travel, historically have traveled alone or with one side person, and just sell CDs and T-shirts and posters, and I now have tea towels with lyrics on them. They seem to be a hot item. Once CDs are gone and nobody wants them anymore, we'll just sell other shit, apparently, and just give the music away and sell tea towels. But as long as I can get people to pay $20 at the door to come see me, I'm doing all right, town to town around the world, Western world. And that's what I do, and every now and then I get cuts. I used to have publishing deals. I don't have one now. I have someone who administers my publishing. So let's say Yellowstone, I don't know how they found it, but Yellowstone wanted a song I wrote called Mercy Now. And so my administrator negotiated the fee, and it was a good one. And if I'd owned the master, it would have been a great one. But the master is owned by Universal. That song, Mercy Now, is on a record I made for Universal Records, a division of Universal called Lost Highway. And so they own the master, so they got the master fee, and I got the writer's fee. But, I mean, that one placement is, probably 30% of what I make in a year, troubadouring. So there's a lot of money in that, but I don't have even with my somewhat impressive resume at this point, I don't have the ability to get a straight-up publishing deal because I don't write hits. I write songs like that will get cut, but probably never played on the radio. I don't write hits. I never really was that kind of writer, and I tried to be for about a year in Nashville and realized this is not what I do well, and the people who do it well, they do it well naturally. So I figured, well, I push another rock up a mountain. Let's just do what I do and do it right. Because truly, I really want to get back to what I started with. I see songs and songwriting as a spiritual practice for me, and I use it to help myself grow spiritually, to become less confused, and to make sense of a very complicated world around me. And I use it to speak truth to my own emotional state so that I don't have to stay stuck in it. In a way, it's therapeutic. And most recently, I've been given the great gift of using this somewhat therapeutic approach to songwriting to work with wounded and highly traumatized veterans. And so I take this fascist killing device and sit and bear witness to wounded veterans' stories and their families' stories, and take what they tell me, through a program, a nonprofit called Songwriting with Soldiers, and put their words into music, and the songs are transformative for them. There's something really powerful that happens when you can articulate a trauma through a song. See, the reason trauma is so deadly, our veterans are dying 22 a day by their own hand, it's because there's no words for what happened. Trauma is ineffable. You can't find words because what happened is so bad there are no words. The language of trauma is silence or a scream. And music can get into that space and penetrate and articulate emotion that it's very, very hard to get to, even through poetry or metaphor. And the music can get in there and help the veterans go, that's how I feel, that's how I feel. When I teach songwriting, I always tell my students, songs are what feelings sound like. Songs are what feelings sound like. Songs articulate emotion. We feel music. And great songs are more than just a form of empathy. They are empathy. Great songs will get you into a stranger's experience, and you become that person for 3.5 minutes, and you understand. And yet that separation, that deadly separation that happens after a trauma, the gap closes with a good song written about that experience. The veterans have their Me Too moments, if you know what I mean. When I write a song that has been co-written with a wounded veteran, and we play that song in front of their buddies, and their buddies put their hand on the shoulder of the co-writer and say, "Me too, man, me too." It closes the gap of isolation, and helps penetrate some of the suicide ideation. It removes some of that death wish because you're not alone. It's the aloneness that's so deadly. And songs can help us know we're not alone. That's one of the biggest reasons for songs, I think, is to help us know we're not alone. It's very lonely out there, especially if you're dealing with trauma. And there's very few veterans and very few artists, quite frankly, who aren't dealing with. We're drawn to music for a reason, most of us. So, I fast-forwarded through a lot of stuff, but that's kind of my story. I learned how to write songs to save my ass. Now I've been given this great gift to help save other asses, and here I sit, try to articulate this thing that's happened over a nearly 30-year period of time. I'd love to... I'd play Mercy Now for you, and maybe play one of the veteran songs and just sort of open it up to a discussion, more back and forth, because I don't want to just talk. I'm good at answering questions, and I can let you into my process too if it's helpful. I'm sure there's songwriters here who might want to get into my process, how I do it, and I'd be happy to try to explain it to the best of my ability. Each song is its own thing, and I don't have a way of doing it. It's different every time, but I do have certain things that happen every time. And one of the things I think that has to happen for me to know I've written a song worthy of bringing out to you is I have to have a moment in that song where I get what's called chicken skin. The Dutch named it that, chicken skin. They would come up to me when I first started touring over in the Netherlands, and they point to their arms, and they'd go, look what you did. It's when goosebumps come and the hair stand up. It's a visceral response to truth and empathy. It's a visceral response to connection. We know it's true because how come? Well, so I know that has to happen for me when I'm writing, and that's how I know it's good. My skin will tell me, literally, or I'll get tears in my own eyes. If I move myself with the song, I have a much greater confidence in the work that it's going to move you. And this song is one of those that gave me tears and the chicken skin. And this may be the song that's going to end up on my tombstone if I decide to take up that much space after I die. This is the one that people always ask for, and the one that I couldn't play a show without playing. And it's the one that is probably my most well-known song, and it's called Mercy Now. Well, my father sure could use a little mercy now. the fruits of his labor falling right slowly on the ground. His work is almost over, won't be long, he won't be around. I love my father, he could use some mercy now. And my brother sure could use a little mercy now. He's a stranger to freedom, shackled to his fear and doubt. The pain that he lives in, it's almost more than living will allow. I love my brother, he could use some mercy now. My church and my country, they could use a little mercy now. As they sink into a poison pit, it's gonna take forever to climb out. They carry the weight of the faithful who follow them down. I love my church and country, they could use some mercy now. Every living thing could use a little mercy now. Only the hand of grace can end the race towards another mushroom cloud. There's people in power who'll do anything to keep their crown. I love life, life itself could use some mercy now. Yeah, we all could use a little mercy now. Oh, I know we don't deserve it, but we need it anyhow. We hang in the balance, dangle between hell and hallowed ground. And every single one of us could use some mercy now. Yes, every single one of us could use some mercy now. Thank you. So that song came when a lot of personal and political things collided. I wrote this one in early 2002. That was when the Spotlight series in the Globe was highlighting the pedophile priests in the Boston area. It was international news. Priest after priest after priest was in handcuffs, hurting children. That's when George Bush was pushing, and I could tell we were going to be invading Iraq, a country that had nothing to do with the attacks of the World Trade Center on 9/11. And my father was no longer able to recognize me. He had dementia and Alzheimer's, and had gone completely missing mentally. And the war that I had had with my dad my whole life was over. He needed me to parent him now. And I realized that I had to put down my arms and show up. And my brother was in prison. All of those things combined made that song. And it's a once-in-a-lifetime kind of song. And I didn't want to get specific about any of those events, because I knew I wanted the song to exist outside of time, and if I wrapped it into a specific event that was married to time, it would become dated. So I didn't want to say George Bush, I didn't want to say Iraq. I just wanted to say, we're sinking in a poison pit, and it's going to take forever to climb out, and here we are 19 years later, we're still in the poison pit. We have not climbed out. I'm so glad I was wise enough to not marry it to a specific time and date the song. And I didn't want to say my brother was in prison and embarrass my mother, who is a nice Southern woman, and didn't want people to know that her son was in prison. And when asked where Michael was for 20 years, she said, "Oh, no, I haven't seen him around in a little bit." So that's how it rolls down Deep South. And so I said he's shackled to his fear and doubt, which made the song much more universal. So many, many more people could insert their brother into that paradigm rather than be specific, use a metaphor to stay honest, but not embarrass or shame my family. He's out of prison. He's okay with me talking about it now, and he's doing okay, and my mom's able to talk about it. The story has a somewhat happy ending, and I'm able to talk about it without breaking any confidences, but it made for a better song, actually, to respect the wishes of those people. And, the church and country, I tied them together because they were sinking at the same time. The Vatican still covers up for pedophile priests. I put that in one of the great wrongs of our time, and it's still happening. So all of that collided into that song that I think is the one that I'm probably going to be known for. So I would encourage you as songwriters to put yourself in there, but find a way to make it universal. Make it bigger than just the self, Bonnie.
But in the I Drink It, there were a lot of really specific details that made it seem so real.
Yes.
So how do you make the decision of which details, when to include those kinds
Well, that's where the art comes in, and all the craft in the world ain't going to help you with that. That's the art, when I work with songwriters, I ask my songwriters to think of yourself as a cinematographer when you write a song. You've got to give us a little movie. And the visuals really, really put the listener into the story. For songs to generate empathy, you got to make people feel something. And the way to make people feel something is not to tell them how to feel. That has zero impact. And to tell them how you feel doesn't have a whole lot of impact either. If I were to say, war sucks and pedophile priests are a problem, and it makes me feel real bad. What you think is, you might want to work on that song, lady. Your song sucks, lady. You can't get there by telling people what to feel or telling people how you feel. So what do? You've got to create a scene and think of your words as a camera lens. And there's moments in a character's life, Even if you're the person you're singing about, you have to become a character in your song that tell the world who you are. There's some stuff in I Drink that I call God lines that are just so much bigger than, I don't know how it got written, like God gave me that, like some creative wisdom bigger than single little Mary Gauthier was able to say, at night he'd sit alone and smoke. I'd see his frown behind his lighter's flame. If you got an alcoholic dad, you know this guy. He's sitting alone in the dark. I see my dad. He's in his yellow chair. He's drinking late into the night. I'm going to get some water, and he lights a cigarette, and I see his frown, and then the light goes out, and he's in the dark again. And he's sitting there scowling, and he's miserable. That is an archetypical moment for an alcoholic dad. And put that in there, and you feel it. Even if you don't even have an alcoholic dad. If you have an alcoholic dirty uncle or something, you have some reference for that moment. The guy sitting alone in the dark, smoke, and then the dark again. And that is the moment that tells you who he is. So I don't have to say, he was a miserable bastard who fought with everyone. And in the end, he was lonely. That sucks. Your brain is able to come up with all that when I give you one picture. That gives you the chance to come up with the information yourself and then feel it. There was a question.
You showed his feeling, the frown.
Yes.
But that line killed me when you sang it, the whole picture behind the flame.
See his frown behind the lighter's flame. Yeah, because then you felt it. Your brain goes, oh, he's a sad, lonely, miserable man. And clearly he's not able to be there for his family. He's sitting alone in the dark, smoking, drinking at night. And that was my dad. And the song doesn't blame him, though. That was his dad, too. It's not his fault. It just happened. And the song actually is going to let you decide whether there's blame. And I think that assuming your listeners are intelligent is a very good way to go every single time. Even though it is assuming a lot these days. I think it's important. I think it's important to... so I think of it as a little movie. And so I've got to get pictures in there. I'm of the belief that a song can change the world. It's a big idea. It was popular back in the days when they were using songs to fight against the war in Vietnam. And I have an understanding of how this works. And here's how I see it. A song can change a heart. I see it happening every night when we play veteran songs. And I'm singing to people who are hard on the left and who have stereotypes in their mind of who our soldiers are, the way that I did. You know, I thought our average soldier was Trump voting, NRA loving, right-wing, conservative Republican. That's who I thought our military was. It's not. That's a stereotype. Our military is 56% Democrat today. And an awful lot of our soldiers volunteered for the military because they wanted to save lives, not kill people. A lot of the specialized troops I work with in, let's say, EOD, the explosive ordnance disposal technicians, the men and women who are highly trained to dismantle bombs built to kill our troops, they said, Mary, I went to the military to save people. You know, they go in and take bombs apart with their hands to save people. They don't go in as trained killers. They go in to save lives. So my stereotypes were crazy wrong. And so a lot of people's are. Stereotypes are almost always wrong because they generalize something that has no business being generalized. And so I go in and play some of these songs to people who have these stereotypes, and I see it. The song changes their heart. They suddenly understand on a heart level who this veteran is, and then the heart has a little conversation with the mind. I can't go in and change your mind. I can't tell you, you need to believe the way I believe. It doesn't work. But if I can get to your heart will get to your mind. Songs change worlds by changing hearts. That's what I think. It's empathy. It's empathy, that the power lives in empathy. That is a crisis, I think. We're in an empathy crisis. We're not feeling each other anymore. We're fighting each other. And so we have this bridge here that kills this fascist thinking. The song and music is a bridge that builds connections between human hearts. And there's a requirement, though. There's got to be honesty and truth and vulnerability in the work. Or it is purely entertainment, which is a completely different discussion. Songs that are purely entertainment are fine. I'm not putting them down, but it's very different than the work that I do. And I don't really have a spiel around that. It's different. It's not the way that I roll, and it's not anything I really know much about. Even that, I've seen someone say, like Laurie McKenna, my friend, whose songs really are of the heart, have great success in the entertainment field. Every now and then, they sneak one in that means something, and Laurie probably wrote it. I'd like to play you one of the Veterans' Wives songs. Is that okay? Jamie, would you join me? This song I wrote with a group of 6 wives of veterans at a retreat that we did with couples. We do couples retreats sometimes. And so our military spouses are a group of people we haven't heard from much at all. And so this viewpoint is compelling because it's new. How many spouses have we really heard from? And what the wives told me is that they feel as though they're invisible, and that they told me that they are experiencing a war after the war. They thought the war would be over when their husband got home and everything would be okay. And what has happened in reality is the war comes home inside of their spouse, and they have to continue to deal with it when he gets home. And in so many ways, they feel invisible around this, and they don't know how to talk about it. And so this song, Beth Nielsen Chapman and I wrote with these 6 wives, and we just captured what they were telling us and poured it into this. And this song was chosen by Malcolm Gladwell as his favorite song of 2018. And we got to be on his podcast that Rick Rubin, the great record producer, produces. It's called
Broken Record.
Broken Record. And it's up on all where you get podcasts. If you want to hear the podcast that Rick Rubin produced of Jamie and I taking questions and talking about this work with the veterans. But this song, I think, is a song that we play, and every night I'll get a military spouse in the line at the CD table at the end of the show, and she just grabs me in tears and hugs me and cries and says, "You get it." I was like, the song gets it. Yeah, I get it, but it's the song that's doing the heavy lifting. And that it's the women who helped write this, the co-writers, that are putting a part of their soul out into the world. And you see the purpose of that, how it helps other people who feel so alone. And that connection is extremely important to people who feel isolated in their story and alone. It's like taking a lifesaver and throwing it out to somebody who's at sea going, "Help me, help me, help me." You're tossing them a lifesaver, literally. And I see it in their eyes, the gratitude. And man, this being nominated for Grammy's cool, but having people telling you that your work is saving their life and is meaningful to them in a very significant way is in some ways cooler. Because the fame thing, it doesn't have the impact of purpose. It actually can be addictive, and you need more, and you need more, and you need more, and you need more. This purpose thing it has legs, and so this is called The War After the War. I'm gonna give it a shot.
Who's gonna care for the ones who care for the ones who went to war? There's landmines in the living room, eggshells on the floor. shadow of your honor and your pain. I stare out of the window as our dreams go down the drain, invisible. The war after the war. Get no purple heart. I'm supposed to carry on. I can't fall apart. People look at you and thank you for the sacrifice you made. They look at me and smile, say I'm lucky, you're okay. Invisible. War after the war. But I'm a soldier too, just like you, serving something bigger than myself. I serve unseen, caught in between my pain and the pain of someone else. But I'm stronger than you think I am. I'm right here by your side. I am not your enemy. I don't wanna fight. There's no going back in time. I know you're not the same, but you are not the only one for whom the world has changed. Invisible. The war after the war. After the war.
This is my partner, Jamie Harris. So I know a lot of you got to get somewhere too. I understand. Yeah, no worries. Yeah, I'll hang out with whoever has questions, or can you give me some idea of what you're thinking, or questions, anything. Happy to interact here. Yes, sweetheart.
So when you are writing your songs, just in general, like in terms of looking back to what your creative process is, have you ever had any instances where it's like nothing's just clicking, like you're kind of like just blocked, and how would you go about like creative blocks?
Ask that again in a different way. Do I have creative blocks?
That's what I'm asking. Like, have you ever had any? And
Oh, yeah.
So, like, how did you what was the process of trying to get through it?
In a single song? Well, I always think songwriting should be called song rewriting. Songwriting makes it sound easy or something. I can rewrite a song a couple hundred times. I used to get asked the question, how do you know when your song is done? And my answer used to be when I'm ready to play it in front of Guy Clark. Because I used to tour with Guy, and I wouldn't pull out a song in front of Guy Clark unless I was damn sure of it. But Guy's gone now. And so my answer is, I know a song is done because I feel it in my gut. And if I'm not feeling it and I have a doubt, I'd stay on it until I feel that release, and I know that's as good as I can make it. I'll stay with the song quite a long time until I feel like it's right. Now, the veteran songs are written real fast. They're easy for me to write in many ways because it's not my experience. I'm not sorting through my own trauma and confusion in the veteran songs. I'm helping somebody sort through theirs. So I'll just ask them, like I worked with an Army mechanic, a female Army mechanic, and I said, give me a list of tools you work with. She said, well, torque wrenches and ratchets and multimeters and scales. was an army mechanic. I worked with the men. I worked on my back, and I tried to fit in. Torque wrenches and ratchets, multimeters and scales, grease on my face, grease on my hands, grease under my nails. I just let you in on her world. But if it's my world, I got a lot of confusion around what it is that defines my experience, and so I've got to. It usually starts with this big, huge thing, and I've got to corral it in to one thing. And a lot of times, it's like herding cats. It's like they're everywhere, and I don't know what. I've learned over the years, if I can start with a good title, I have a running shot at finishing the song. And I do get stuck, and oftentimes if I get stuck for too long, I'll bring in a co-writer. I have a list of people that I love and trust who I can invite into my process and know that they're going to be able to help me finish a song. But I haven't actually been writing in the last year and a half, 2 years. I haven't been writing my own songs. I am still writing with veterans when I do the retreats, because the book has got me all tied up in my thinking about writing the book is one of the hardest things I've ever tried to do is write a damn book. And so I'm not writing songs. I feel bad about it, like I should be writing songs with this political chaos and insanity that we're living through. But I just so focused on the book right now. But how to get unstuck is a big question. Yeah, the book started out as I got signed by the Yale University to write a book for Yale University Press called Why Songs Matter. And it sounds easy till you sit down and try to articulate such a thing. Why Water is Wet by Mary Gauthier. Like, well, but I was able to get to at least some of Why Songs. As you notice from my playing, I'm not an incredibly great musician. These songs are 3 chords in the truth. They're quite simple chord progressions. I can't read music, and I'm not proficiently expertise sometimes to even tell you what key I'm in if I'm using the capo. I'm not a great musician. I'm good enough to articulate in a way that connects, and my songs do their work. But I'm still have a lot to learn on the instruments. So the book I wrote for Yale is not written in a classic way from one musician to another. And so I wrote it as a spiritual approach to songwriting. Basically, that's why songs matter to me, is that they come from spirit through spirit to connect with spirit, to help us to know that we belong to each other and that we're not alone. And so that book never met its publishing date at Yale, and God bless them, they let me keep the advance and keep the book because they wanted a more Yale-ish book, why they hired me. I'm not the person to write a Yale book. I don't even know a bass clef from a treble clef. I'm not the person to write a Yale book. But I got to keep the manuscript, and then it got signed over to St. Martin's Press, which is one of the big 5 in New York, and real money came. And so now I'm writing a book about why songs matter and why they matter to me. I'm taking some of what I wrote with Yale, and then they want memoir. Like, why does it matter to me personally? What have songs done for me? How did songs save your life, Mary Gauthier? And it's pretty simple, but I have to do it in story form. You know, like that song I Drink. It helped me to envision the reality of my situation in a new way. That, you know, if I return to active addiction, it's not going to get better, it's just going to get worse. And I am going to end up alone in a room and in some hovel of a place blaming the world for my problems. And so the imagination and the use of it through songs and songwriting are a powerful thing for good when when you're trying to articulate emotional truth. And so that's what the book is about, and you know, I go deep into the traumas that shaped me and made me an addict by the time I was 15. And then I hopefully will go into how the mastery of the art form helped save me, and then has gone even further and allowed me to be a part of helping veterans who are fighting the worst of the worst trauma, war trauma, PTSD. Articulating it is, I know it's magic. I know it's almost a miracle to see a veteran I wrote with, was in a wheelchair. He was in a explosion. His Humvee hit a IED and got blown up, and he was in a wheelchair. His spinal cord was bent. And after we wrote the song, he plays harmonica. I was able to bring him on a Grand Ole Opry with me, and he played on the Opry, and he got a huge, sustained 2-minute standing ovation. And something about all that helped him so much that he started sitting in his chair and working with a physical therapist to straighten his spine. He would send me pictures. His arm would be black and blue here from putting pressure on his neck, just like that. And it would turn this black and blue, just like that. And he slowly but surely learned how to walk again. And last summer, he was able to walk the Appalachian Trail. His kids got their dad back. He's out of the wheelchair. He gave his wheelchair to an old Vietnam veteran. He had one of those cool four-wheelers that could go anywhere. He found the right person to give it to. First, he gave away a service dog. Then he gave away his wheelchair. And now he's advocating, and he's going to walk. He did a 422-mile wheelchair ride to raise money for Songwriting with Soldiers, the organization that helped him, that I was able to be a part of and help him. And 422 miles for a reason. He did it for the 22, 422, the 22 a day that killed himself. And he raised around $18,000. And next year he's going to walk it, 422 miles. And so all of this just to say that all goes in the book somehow. And tell the story of this transformative, miraculous power of song. It's what he knew, man, what he knew. You don't kill fascists by taking a guitar and hitting upside the head. You kill fascists by speaking truth to power, and by telling on the demons in your soul, and you know, rebuking them by shining the light. It's like cockroaches. You shine the light and off they go. They're scary little. You just shine the light and off they go. It's a really different approach than what's popular today. I think it's an old-fashioned approach. I do see a lot of people coming back to it, though. I think a lot of people are looking for purpose in their art now. That the accumulation of money and fame as an end game has a pretty hollow feel to it when we're dealing with so many existential crises in the world right now. To attach your art to purpose, and a purpose bigger than yourself, for me, has been incredibly gratifying. And it's also helped close the hole in my own soul. It gives me a solid reason to wake up in the morning. And that's what I'm going to try to put in the book, as best I can. Yeah. Any other thoughts or questions? Yes?
Do you ever go back to your songs that mean a lot to you that perhaps are not so mainstream and try to adapt them to potentially be mainstream?
Oh, I don't have anything mainstream. I'm way outside of mainstream. But I once it's written. I can't go back and do much with it. It's a song at a certain point it captures a moment in time. And if I wrote it right, it'll have new meaning over time. Like Mercy Now is so relevant right now, and I wrote that in 2002. So if I wrote it right, it'll have new meaning because the metaphor will deepen and take on what my life has been through since I'd written it. But I don't go back and rewrite songs. Bob Dylan does it all the time, though. He rewrites shit on stage in the moment. But that's not something that I generally do. It's when it's done for me. Yeah, there's time for both of you. Oh, yeah, there is. Although it changes. And the distinct Nashville form of writing today is very different than when I went there in 2002.
Is it hard, like finding co-writers and just kind of finding your way without writing the way everybody else did?
Well, here's the thing. I think the only thing you really have to offer is your own voice. The only thing you really have to offer is you. And I always direct writers to sound more like you, sound more like yourself and less like them, and that's how you're going to become a great writer. Now, whether or not they get on board, who the hell knows? But the stronger you are in your own voice sounding like yourself, the more of a chance you have of actually coming into your voice and doing something that is going to rise to the level of great art, which I think is the point. If you want to conform to what they're doing, you're always going to be 8.5 to 11 months behind the curve. You're always going to be behind. And I don't even pay attention to what they're doing. They're going to do what they do. Here's what I did. I went to Nashville, and I went straight to ASCAP. And I went to the artist representative of ASCAP, and I said, Ralphie, make me some appointments with publishers. I said, here's some songs I've written. What two are the best two songs? And he picked I Drink and Mercy Now. Now make me some appointments with, no, I hadn't written Mercy Now. I Drink and some other song. Make some appointments with publishers and tell me what publishers would even listen to this kind of song. And that's kind of their job. And they're not going to do it if your songs aren't there yet, by the way. So you got to be ready. You got to be there. And you got one chance to make a first impression. Don't fuck it up. You got one chance to make a first impression. People go there too soon, and if you're not ready, if it's not low hanging fruit and ready to be picked, the second chance is hard to come by. You got one chance to make a first impression. So you get an appointment and you get what they have to say, and. I didn't get signed on the spot, but I got into a relationship with the publisher who said, bring me more songs, and then bring me more songs. And eventually, I did get an opportunity to work for that publisher, and the publisher then got me a record deal. I don't even know if that's still how it works in Nashville with publishers. Pat would know more than I do about that.
Ralph Murphy?
That was Ralph Murphy.
Yeah.
He was my dear friend. Yeah. Yeah, he just died, and I was honored to give a eulogy for him at the service, but he helped a lot of songwriters, and he helped pair us up with the publisher that most matched the songs we wrote. But I think that's still going on in Nashville. I went to Nashville because I did want a record deal, and I did want my songs cut. And that's worked out for me. But I am in there now, not with a record deal or get my songs cut. I have a distribution deal with a company called 30 Tigers. So I make the record, they give me an advance, and they distribute the record through a major distribution channel. I don't have a publishing deal. I have a publishing administrator who negotiates for me and collects my royalties, but doesn't pitch. I don't even need to be in Nashville anymore. But I'm there because I like being in the center of the country. It's easy to get anywhere in the country. Nashville's dead center of the country. And I like being around the other songwriters. It lifts me up to be around my friends, the other songwriters. But a lot of us get into our 50s and 60s and don't have publishing deals anymore. And yet our songs do get recorded, but they're cherry-picked. And the artists and the producers find them because they're listening to the records, our records. They find, I think Yellowstone found it because they listened to the record. But I wouldn't try to conform to a marketplace myself, because I think that diminishes what it is that I do best, which is me. I do me best.
Thinking about what you just said about having a relationship with a publisher who wants you to bring more and more songs, it sounds like there can sometimes be maybe pressure to produce stuff. But I feel like with my writing, whenever I try to force a song out, it doesn't really work.
Exactly. I tried that when I got there. It worked, but the songs weren't so good.
So how do you get yourself into a state of mind where you feel inspired to create something authentic?
Well, that's a good question. I think for me, working with the veterans has done that for me over the last 5-6 years. And I sit down and listen to these incredibly moving stories, and I'm so privileged to be given these stories to handle with care and to turn into songs. That really moves me. But I do have to feel something to write it. So I have to bring myself to the emotion, and then it turns out I need quite a bit of solitude to create. And so I'm in a new relationship, and the last thing I want to do is go be in solitude. So I just want to enjoy the early, years of this relationship that I have with Jamie, and not just carding it off. But we wrote songs when we were just getting together, and we got these songs. I was over in Europe for 6 weeks, and we were writing songs to each other, kind of like love letters, love songs, and that was cool. We got 3 or 4 each out of ourselves that way. And there's going to come a time where we're going to go, okay, we gotta get back to our writing desks. Right now, for me, one of the great joys of being an independent artist and being an entrepreneur is I do what I want when I want. Nobody tells me what to do, except the government. I have to pay taxes, but I'm free, So I write when I want to write, and right now I'm writing a book. But when you get out of school, there'll be a lot of pressure on you to, you got to monetize this shit. But I think you might want to. You might be on fire with it. I'm like, okay, I did this, now I'm ready to do this. You can be on fire with it like I was when I had that restaurant. I had a lot to prove. And if I wasn't cooking, I was writing. I was always writing. I had my face in a blank page, working. And I wrote 4 records fast. I wrote 4 records in 5 years. And then it starts to slow down a little. I know now, like the cycle and how my career works. So I'll put a record out. I put this out, the Rifles Rosary Beads, 18 months ago. I still got, my records have good tailwinds. They don't race up a chart, have a hit, and then disappear. They slowly catch on. Like it takes a year for people to hear it, which is great because it's building, They slowly, I get a 2-year touring cycle out of a record. So that ends probably in May, but we're booking still steady, solid income till May, and then it's probably going to drop off. I'll probably have a slow festival season in the summer, next summer, and then it's time to write, and then I'll feel it. I'll know, okay, you got a business, you got to write, and I'll find my way into songs through the urgency of having to write, and there'll be a lot going on inside of me. There always is to write about. And I'll try to pull from that. There is a phenomenon, too, that happens when you've got 9 records and a lot of accolades. It's like you become intimidated by your own work. You're like, I can't write as good as Mary Gauthier. Like, there's no way I can write. That is daunting. I've set a pretty high standard for but my friends do it. I watch them outdo themselves. I have a friend named Gretchen Peters who outdoes herself over and over again. Eliza Gilkison, Beth Nielsen Chapman, they keep doing it. Daryl Scott, and they set a pretty high bar a long time ago for themselves, and somehow the songs rise you there, but it is daunting. And it's like recovery in some ways. I'm never sober enough to have been fully recovered. As an artist, there's no job security, or you don't get there and just have it there. You always risk repeating yourself and becoming sort of an imitation of yourself. You see it happens all the time in careers where artists imitate themselves. Like for a while, Lucinda Williams was doing Lucinda Williams impersonations. But she's got herself back, but you get kind of lost. Dylan was doing Dylan impersonations in the 90s. It's like, I'm going to do Bob Dylan for you, because I don't know who I am. You get lost in that. But then you see that angst will create, that's what I need to write about. I'm lost again. And then you back in the lifeboat, and the songs save you again. This is a beautiful, beautiful thing. But it requires vulnerability in the writing. You've got to get vulnerable. And I've spoken so much I forgot your original question.
I think you answered.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
Well, I'm just still a little bit curious about what your process is like. Like, do you have a song coming, like growing inside of you? Like, what happens, right? Do you start playing around on chords? Do you think of words and start writing them down in a notebook and then find the chords? Like,
it kind of comes together. I'll mess around with my guitar, and I get stuck in certain patterns. And so I'll write 3 songs that have the same damn pattern. Like, damn, they sound alike. I'm gonna have to pick one, you know. Yeah. A lot of times these days, I think it starts with the story. After Trump got elected, I've worked with a lot of. This is a pretty good story, actually. I've worked with a lot of expert trauma doctors, working through my own childhood trauma stuff. And I work with this incredible Boston-based trauma expert named Dr. Bessel van der Kolk. Bessel has a best-selling book called The Body Keeps the Score. It's one of the definitive books on trauma. He came out with it in the last couple of years. And Bessel is one of my mentors. I've done retreats with him as a participant, also as a co-presenter. Bessel told me he got to meet Nelson Mandela. Nelson was in solitary confinement for nearly 30 years on Robben Island, and Bessel said, that's utterly traumatic. How, in God's name, Nelson Mandela, do you deal with that trauma? And Mandela told him, oh, that's easy, boxing. Boxing? He said, yeah, boxing. It's the left and the right brain working together. Boxing is how Nelson Mandela dealt with trauma. And it turns out boxing is really good for Parkinson's as well. It's the left and right brain communicating with each other that helps rebuild its neuroplasticity. It rebuilds parts of the brain. And so after Trump was elected, it occurred to me I might ought to take up boxing, because that was very traumatic for me. It still is. And so I hired a boxing coach. And you know, a few sessions in, turns out this dude voted for Trump. And I'm like, oh, shit, I can't box with you. I hate you. And then we sat down. It was around Christmas. The election's in November. This was now Christmas. And I said, man, I don't really like Christmas. Christmas bums me out. He goes, me too. And I said, why does Christmas bum you out? Because I know why it bummed me out, because I had such an unpredictably dramatic and oftentimes painful family. And he said, well, I remember when I was a kid, my dad and Mom and I went to New York for Christmas, and we went and looked in the windows of the department stores at Macy's and stuff, at all the displays. They move and stuff, and they were going to show me all this cool stuff for Christmas. And I saw a guy on a park bench, and he was crying. And I said, Dad, why is that guy crying? It's Christmas, and everything is so beautiful, and this is the happiest time of the year, right? And my dad said, well, son, that's just the way life goes. And he said, ever since then, I've been bummed out at Christmas. And then I thought, well, he might have voted for Trump, but he's not a complete asshole. And I was able to find some communion with him in that moment. And so I turned that story into a song. The story is where the song started, and I just changed it. Instead of the story taking place on at Christmas time in New York City, I put it in a truck stop. And I combined it with an experience that I had playing the Grand Ole Opry. I introduced Mercy Now as a song I wrote before the United States of America invaded Iraq. And some yahoo at the Opry stood up, pointed at me, and said, God bless America, at me. And, of course, we all know what he was saying. He was saying people like me don't belong at the Opry. And he God bless America'd me. And it was actually foreshadowing of what we were fixing to see with this hate and division. It was a foreshadowing. I didn't know that. But I put that kind of into this. And so all these stories combine in my subconscious, I guess, and become one song. And so I'll just play that for you. A truck stop drunk shouts the national anthem at a waitress pouring coffee with trembling hands. And a TV screen on the wall keeps screaming, make America great again. And an old man facing hands weeping in a booth in the back alone. And a child says, Daddy, why is he crying? And her father grabs her hand and says, we're going home. Life, it sure gets lonesome. Love is hard to find. True gets lost in the telling. In a world that's turned unkind. And the winter sun sets slowly on Salina. The Kansas wind blows bitter, meaning cold. I pay my bill, grab my keys and jacket. I steel myself and get back on the road. Life, it sure gets lonesome. Love is hard to find. True gets lost in the telling. In a world that's turned unkind. So it's kind of like the stories build up, you know, the boxing guy and the God Bless America at me, and then the Salina, Kansas is where I lived in the halfway house when I was a kid, and also it's a very conservative part of the country. And so I put the national anthem guy, the God Bless America guy, and turned it into the national anthem guy. But it's a fictionalized, it's creative nonfiction is what, and the stories build up and they all come into this one, and it crystallizes into this thing that becomes the next song, I think. And I don't know how that works. It's the subconscious working when I'm dreaming, or I'm not forcing it. It seems to have a lifespan of its own. Like it needs to build up to where it's ready to go, and then it's ready to go. And that's not always the way I write, but the better songs, that's how they seem to come together in many ways for me. So you take your life experiences and you kind of twist them around a little. And often my conscious thinking around it is I got to make it universal, not just personal or deeply personal, but I want it to be understood by a lot of people. And so I try to use language that's inclusive without watering it down. Anybody else? Pat?
Writing with soldiers, so you have 6 women, 6 wives. Are they co-writers on the song?
Yes, yeah, the soldiers, they're all co-writers, yeah, 50% of the publishing. Well, it's their story, right? We should give them ownership of that. That's the right thing to do, yeah. Yeah, so every time we manufacture records, I pay them publishing, yeah.
So that's kind of like pop records now, with 7 writers on the song.
Yeah, easily. Easily. A lot of writers. A lot of pennies going everywhere. Uh-huh. Yeah, I think it's the fair and right thing to do with the co-writer is to give them ownership, part ownership of the copyright. It keeps the karma good. Plus, it's their story. We would never have these songs without their experiences.
So because it's a Nashville thing, it's just an even split all the way across, right?
Yep.
Nobody's counting points.
Nope.
So it's not like pop records.
Right. Well, these songs don't really monetize. There's not a lot of money in them. You know, I've sold a couple thousand records. I mean, we did go and play them at HBO in front of the music supervisors, and nothing materialized, but it might. They heard them. We had them all crying at their lunch break. We hit them. We hit them between the eyes with a baseball bat. They're like, you shouldn't do this to us at work. I'm like, well, you know, it's music, and that's what music can do. And maybe something will materialize, and if something big comes, the payout will be fair to all the veterans and their families, for sure. And as this should be. Yeah. In Nashville, whoever's in the room gets a part of the co-write. If somebody's just making coffee, doesn't contribute a line, they still get part of the co-write. That's just the rules of the town. And it's fair because they change the energy in the room. And so there's abundance. You got to think in terms of abundance, not greed. To create more abundance. Get all nitpicky about pennies, things get real tight and scroogey. It's no more fun. So that's kind of my deal. I've gotten away with it now for nearly 30 years, and apparently I get to keep going. We're playing the City Winery tomorrow, and then Fall River. Yeah, Fall River on Friday, and then Connecticut on Saturday, and then we're going out to West Coast, playing Hardly Strictly up in San Francisco, and it just goes on and on. We're heading over to Europe, and just keep one-night stands and small rooms, and every now and then something like a Yellowstone will happen, and it's a little miracle. A real check comes, and it's like, yay! And then back to going. But I have to say that the difference for me between doing this and having that restaurant up the street is profound. I don't know if I could have stayed sober doing that. This has helped me to stay in recovery. And it's helped me to remain compassionate and useful. And that's what I want most of all, is to find a way to take my talent and be useful. What was given to me, I have to be useful and useful to more than just the accumulation of capital. Because these are powerful little things, these songs, and they can do stuff. And I want my songs to do stuff. I want to crack people's hearts open, damn it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bonnie and Pat. Thank y'all for having me. Thank you.